In today's video, we are going to be picking every single Week 15 or Conference Championship Week college football game, not as usual using the beautiful website because we do not have those programmed into that website yet. So hoping that they figure that out one day in college football, but instead we'll use this little graphic that I whipped up with the 9 games that are played this weekend, Conference Championship Weekend. This video is going to be a little different than the typical style has been, obviously, where we're picking like 60 to 70 football games each video, where I just kind of do a drive-by skim across the game. No, in this one we're going to be going a little bit more in-depth to each one. So I'm excited to get into it, excited to make it happen, and we'll start it with the MAC title game. It is one of a couple of rematches here in Conference Championship Weekend. Ohio versus Miami of Ohio. A rivalry, which is fun. Miami of Ohio favored by 1.5. They won the first edition of this matchup by 10. So some Miami of Ohio fans might think that spread is a little disrespectful. Miami is riding a 7-game winning streak, which is pretty crazy to think of what their record was when they started this winning streak. They were 1-3, I believe, when that happened, or maybe 2-3. So it's been a pretty remarkable run they've gone on, and Ohio is on a 5-game winning streak as well. Their loss before that winning streak started was to Miami of Ohio. So really these have been the two most dominant teams in the MAC down the stretch here, and it's suiting that they're going to meet in the MAC title game. I really think the key in this football game is going to be Parker Navarro. Parker Navarro turned it over twice early in that first matchup. They ended up benching him. They brought in the backup. They didn't really have as much success either, and that was just the game right there. Parker Navarro was not the X factor, but if he could be that in this game, that could be huge. And I look at Parker Navarro. He has been electric running the football. Over the last 3 weeks, he's ran for 320 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, he's been their running back one over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if Miami's going to be able to stop that. The Miami defense, however, has been pretty electric in their own right, and they've had to be because Brett Gabbert, the Miami of Ohio quarterback, has actually been pretty sloppy recently. He had only thrown 1 pick all year in MAC play, and now he's thrown 3 in the past 2 weeks. So a pretty interesting trend to keep an eye on there. Will Gabbert be able to protect the football? But the Miami defense has made up for it. Like I said, they've been locked down. They've allowed 7, 21, 7, 9, and 12 in the 5 games since holding Ohio to 20. And when they held Ohio to 20, it was 30-6 at the end of the third quarter. Like, there was 2 late scores from Ohio to get back into that football game. But what I will say is the running for Navarro has really turned it on for this Bobcats offense. They're averaging 37.8 points per game since that Miami of Ohio loss. And so I think if Navarro avoids the early turnovers and he can continue to have success on the ground, I don't see any reason why the Bobcats can't win this game. And I think they will. So give me Miami of Ohio, give me Ohio to beat Miami of Ohio. It's tough with all these Ohio teams in the MAC championship game. I think Tim Allen gets a MAC title, which is massive. Just a couple of seasons ago, they went 3-9. People were really doubting him, and he has turned it around and turned it on. They had the 10-win season last year. I think they'll get another huge year this year and win the MAC title over Chuck Martin's Miami of Ohio team. So that is my pick in that game. We'll get to the Sun Belt title game as the next one, Marshall at Louisiana. This one, not a rematch, but the biggest spread of any game this weekend. Louisiana -6. I find it interesting that that's the biggest spread. We're seeing a lot of tighter spreads in these football games with no divisions. Ironically, this is actually the one that does have a division, and it has the biggest spread. So I think that actually says a lot because we used to see those massive spreads in conference title games. When the ACC Coastal was around, when the Big Ten West was around, those were the kinds of things that would continually happen. Even the Pac-12 South was pretty lackluster for a while there. So I think that it's a good side effect to getting rid of the divisions. Now, the fact that we have these mega conferences, I think complicates it a little bit, but here we are. Marshall's lone Sun Belt Conference loss came on a 23-3 blown lead versus Georgia Southern. Outside of that second half lapse, they've really been quite excellent. They've been pretty killer this season. I think their key is going to be obviously Braylon Braxton at quarterback. They got to let him cook and let him sling it. When he has at least 20 combined rushes and passing attempts, Marshall is 7-0 this season. So I think the key is really simple. Let Braylon Braxton throw and run the football. And it sounds very simple, but that's a key. On the other side of things, Louisiana football can score, and they have done that all season long. Marshall must force Louisiana to be one-dimensional, and the way you do that is by getting out in front early. And I know that is a thing that a lot of announcers say. It might drive you crazy. You might be like, yeah, well, no, duh. You got to get out to a fast start. But when Louisiana's been one-dimensional this season, when they've been forced to just sling it and they haven't been able to be a balanced team, that's when it cost them against Tulane and South Alabama. You go look back, that's the reason they lost those games. They got down early, they became one-dimensional, and it ended up costing them. So if Marshall can pull that off, we could be looking at an upset in this game. I just think Louisiana is at another level, and you talk about forcing them to become one-dimensional. Zylan Perry ran for 150 yards last week for Louisiana. So I think that's going to be the X factor for Louisiana, and I think that's going to be the reason they win. So give me Louisiana to win. I don't know about -6. That seems like a little hefty, but you could. Louisiana's been a solid betting team all season long. So I would take Louisiana to win that conference title game. Let me get a sip of water before we go on to the American title game. Just hydrating in the middle here. Late in the season, voice has been used a lot for these. American Conference title game. Tulane goes on the road to play Army. Tulane is a 5-point favorite in this one. And Tulane coming off of the loss. Their loss to Memphis, I think, was the result of running into an extremely talented team that finally put it together. Like, Memphis was my pick to win the American this year. They were disappointing with losses to Navy and another loss to UTSA. Things fell apart for them. If they could have avoided one of those, they'd be in this conference title game right now. Tulane, I do think, was the better team throughout the season. But on paper, I thought Memphis was a little bit more talented. So them getting torched and shredded like that wasn't too surprising because it was a Memphis team that was capable of that. I definitely think Darian Mensah deserves more love for Tulane. He's their quarterback. He's a freshman, and he's been carving up defenses all year. The big moment has never been too big for him, and I think he's capable of carving up this Army defense. And most importantly, I think Tulane can move the football on the ground against this Army team, just like Notre Dame did. I think Tulane is closer to Notre Dame than any other team on Army's schedule, or than they are to any other team on Army's schedule. So I think it's going to look kind of similar to that. I think Tulane's really going to get out and run and make this happen. Army can still win this football game, obviously. It is a 5-point spread. I'm not going to pretend like that's not a possibility. I'm pretty confident in Tulane, but here's how Army wins it. Clock control. They need one of those 13-minute touchdown drives they're known for. They've got to avoid the early turnovers or turnovers, period. Can't be fumbling the football, can't be making stupid mistakes. They've got to harass Mensah, hope to rattle him early in the game. We've seen some teams do that to him. Oklahoma did that to him earlier this season. Kansas State was able to do that to him a little bit. And they've got to force Tulane into obvious passing situations. Otherwise, Tulane is just going to continually shred them on the ground. And if you let them get any momentum, this game's going to be over. I'm very confident in Tulane in this game regardless, so I'm going to take Tulane, and I think Tulane -5 as well is a good bet. So Tulane is my American Conference title pick. So this takes us to the CUSA, where we've got another rematch game. Western Kentucky at Jacksonville State. Just 1 week ago, Jacksonville State went at Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky wins on the last-second field goal, but now, here we go. Jacksonville State favored by 4.5. So Vegas is telling you, yeah, we still think Jacksonville State's the better team. Jacksonville State now at home. And so it's an intriguing game. I think that Jacksonville State can win a track meet in this football game, and they're going to want that because Western Kentucky's offense has been quietly struggling, which is pretty uncharacteristic of a Tyson Helton squad. And so I think if they can get out and run, they can get Trey Stewart going, they can win this game and make it a high-scoring game and really get there. The over-under set at like 52, so they're saying, hey, it probably will be a little bit high-scoring, but Western Kentucky, I think if they can make this a dogfight again, a mud fight or whatever, I think they'll be the winner. I think if under 40 points are scored again in this game, Western Kentucky will come out on top just because of how much of an edge their defense has played with. They've seemed comfortable in these types of games. Yes, they came out on the wrong end of one a little bit earlier this season against Louisiana Tech, but I really just love picking a team that lost in the first game in the rematch. And so I like Jacksonville State. I like the fact that they're at home, obviously. And I think it's just going to be a lot of points scored, and I think it's going to benefit Jacksonville State because of the way both these teams have been playing in their styles recently. So I'll take Jacksonville State to win this football game. I think Rich Rodriguez rides off into the sunset. There's some noise around Tyson Helton and some head coaching jobs right now. There's some noise around Rich Rod and some coaching jobs right now. So we'll see if the outside noise and distractions get to either of those coaches. We've got our first power conference game to break down here. The Big Ten title, Oregon versus Penn State. The Ducks open as a 3.5-point favorite in this game. Interesting. This is an interesting game because both teams are in the playoffs, clinched. There's really no possibility that either team is out. Loser of this game will, in all likelihood, be the 5 seed. Winner will probably be either the 1 or 2 seed. So it's an interesting battle here, and we'll see how much the Big Ten title truly means to these teams with how they play it. It's kind of just a whole new world we're getting into here. Oregon's only weakness this season was up front. Early in the year, their offensive line was a little inconsistent, and versus Ashton Genty, obviously, they got torched early. And late in the season, once the Ducks really got it rolling, I'm talking about after that Ohio State win, the only team we really saw test the Ducks was Wisconsin. However, in that game, Wisconsin did not win time of possession, did not have the turnover edge. Both teams turned it over once, had more penalties, was 2 of 14 on 3rd and 4th down. So what was it that Wisconsin did to make that a 3-point game and actually have a shot to win that thing? Well, they held Oregon to 3s and not 6s. Multiple times the Ducks got deep into their end zone or their red zone, and Wisconsin did not break. They only allowed 3s. So Penn State is 20th in the country in red zone touchdown percentage. So they actually are pretty decent in the red zone. They held Ohio State to a fumble, and they held them to a couple of field goals in their red zone when they played them. So you see against elite opponents, they've been able to do that. But the issue for Penn State isn't their defense. We know their defense is fantastic. They could hold Oregon to enough, to 17 points and give themselves a chance to win this game. The offense is what has been a disappointment for them and what I don't think can do enough in this game. It'll come down to the Penn State offense, and they just haven't done anything to give you any faith in these games versus the top 4 defenses they played this year. I'm talking about Ohio State. I'm talking about Illinois. I'm talking about Wisconsin. I'm talking about Minnesota. Their point totals: 28, 6, 21, and 26. The 6 is the one where they played Ohio State. Yes, they had the pick 6 in there. It was a defensive touchdown. They just really haven't been overly impressive, and a lot of those points they've gotten actually were a direct result of plays their defense made. So I really think the only way Penn State wins this football game is if their defense gets a touchdown. Aller plays a good game. He plays at least a A- performance, and their defense forces the Ducks to 3s and not 6s. I don't really see that happening. Of those point totals Penn State had in their best game versus a top 4 defense where they scored 28 points, that is enough points to beat Oregon in just 2 games this year. And one of them was the one where they played Idaho. I seriously doubt we're getting the Idaho version of Oregon again. So I think Gabriel's going to step up in the big moment. I think Ducks are going to win. I really don't have any reason to believe Penn State. There's also the factor that James Franklin can't win in big games. So on to the Big 12 title. Arizona State versus Iowa State. Sun Devils favored by 2 points. Both teams have been pretty electric down the stretch here. They're pretty hot right now. And with Sam Leavitt and Cam Scatterbo healthy, Arizona State is 10-0 on the season. Those 2 losses were really just because one of their 2 stars was not healthy. But there's a third star that not as many people talk about, and that's Jordan Tyson, the receiver. He's been phenomenal this season. He was formerly all-conference freshman at Colorado his freshman season. He's battled through injuries, and now here he is at ASU making a big impact. However, he got injured last week. He's going to be out for this game, and I think that's a big factor. It's a significant fall-off from Jordan Tyson to Xavier Guillory and Stovall, their next couple of receivers. However, they've been really creative offensively, getting the ball to other people. Mateer, the tight end, Cam Scatterbo, Kyson Brown, a running back, are all top 5 receivers for this team, and it's because they've been creative at getting the football out to their playmakers in different ways. So those guys are going to have to get involved. And despite their reputation defensively, Iowa State has been torched over the past few weeks. 5 of their last 6 opponents have gone for over 350 yards. The one team that didn't was Utah, and Utah's offense is laughably bad. So ASU is going to score in this football game, and they don't have Jordan Tyson. They have a lot of other playmakers that can make plays. They're going to score points. So it's up to Iowa State. Will they be able to score? They can lean on their dynamic duo of Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins. Those guys are electric. They've been a little inconsistent at times this season, but for the most part, really good. The ASU secondary has been vulnerable at times. So if Rocco Becht and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll can cook and get out and run, it could look a lot like that second half ASU had versus BYU, where they're just doing whatever they want. And that's where ASU can really get hurt in this matchup. I just think ASU has a lot more ways they can hurt Iowa State than Iowa State with them. So when push has come to shove this season, I think they've just been better at finding ways to win. So I trust ASU in this game. I'm going to take ASU to win the Big 12 title game. So we're to the ACC title game, another one with really high stakes. We've got Clemson versus SMU. SMU is going to be favored by 2.5 in this football game. SMU is on 9 straight wins this season. their offense has just really gelled since that 15-point stinker they had versus BYU. Kevin Jennings has been electric. The quarterback thing for them has been interesting to watch with Jennings and Stone going back and forth. But at the end of the day, they've got two quarterbacks late in the season, and that's something that I really think can help you. Clemson has been decently sporadic offensively, inconsistent in the second half of the season, but their defense is still playing at a really high level. And I actually think this is going to be the X factor here because SMU has not played a defensive line like this all season. It was similar, maybe, arguably Louisville, arguably BYU, and those were two of their most spotty offensive outputs of the season. They did do well against Louisville, but against BYU, it was pretty bad. And I think Clemson just gets after them on the line of scrimmage, and I think they really make a big difference at the line of scrimmage, and I think it just works well for them. I think Clemson's going to win this football game. I think there's a lot to be said about a team believing their season is over, but then still getting up off the mat and being ready and winning a football game. So I like Clemson money line, and I think they're going to shock the world, beat SMU. We'll see if the committee decides to drop SMU out. So I don't know what they'll do. That's obviously going to be a big thing to watch, and there'll be a lot of outrage if they go ahead and drop them out because of that. Next up, we've got the Mountain West title game, UNLV at Boise State. The fact that we're getting a conference title on the blue turf, just absolute cinema. Love to see it. Weather conditions could be a factor in this football game. I'm praying for snow. I think that could be really fun. I'm a sucker for a good snow game. But I think it's going to be a pretty interesting one to watch because these teams already played each other earlier this season. I was at that football game. Watched UNLV actually have a shot throughout that game, but Boise State just made a couple opportunistic plays defensively, and Ashton Jeanty did not have his best game versus UNLV. It was pretty spotty at best. However, it was Maddox Madsen who really shined, and he's going to be probably the X factor for Boise State in this football game. And I know Ashton Jeanty is the big name and the guy people are going to want to talk about, but his performances have been a little spotty in terms of maximizing his impact on a football game. Like, there's been a few games this year where, yes, if they just continue to hand the ball off to Jeanty, they probably lose the football game because the defenses are so honed in on Jeanty. I just think UNLV is a team that's capable of not having to completely sell out and stack the box and still being able to limit his effectiveness. They did stack the box pretty significantly in the first matchup between these guys. We'll see how that changes. I just think Boise State has been playing a little bit different lately and not in a good way. I've been a little nervous with some of their performances that they put out there. And so it leads me to believe that I think UNLV will actually be ready for this one. Haj Malik Williams has been electric to watch. He doesn't know where Boise, Idaho is on a map for some reason, which is hilarious. But I just feel like UNLV is peaking at the right time. Boise State is not. They have been very shaky in their past couple of performances, and so it's not going to be a trendy or sexy pick, but I'm picking UNLV to win this football game and win a Mountain West championship, which would really be a shocker. Could be the last time we see Ashton Jeanty in a Boise State uniform, which would be pretty wild. So, final game here, we've got Texas versus Georgia. Longhorns are a 2.5-point favorite. Longhorns, I think, will be absolutely ready for this rematch. They looked shell-shocked versus Georgia the first time they played. And since then, we've seen them march into Vandy, Arkansas, Texas A&M. By no means an easy place to play, especially with your highly ranked team with a target on your back. And they had no real issues taking control of that game and dictating how those games went. They silenced a red-hot Florida team as well. I think Texas has been playing like one of the best teams in the country as of late. Georgia has looked downright sloppy. They're coming off of a physical, emotional rivalry game. The Longhorns, I think, should write a much different story here. I just don't think Georgia's going to get the same crazy field position luck, you could call it. But I know Georgia, obviously you make your own luck in that case. I don't think they're going to get that same field position stuff they got last game, and I think the Longhorns are really going to just make this a much different football game, especially because now their running game has improved so much over the past couple of weeks as they found new guys that have made an impact. Georgia's one out is if we can get Carson Beck from the second half of the Tech game or the second half of the Bama game or in some of those master classes this season, the Tennessee game. If we can get Carson Beck to do that kind of performance, I think Georgia can win this football game. Obviously, they can. It's a super tight spread. It's Georgia. They can win this football game. But I just trust Texas more than any team in the country right now. They're playing really well. Give me Texas to win this football game and be the SEC champions. So that is my final pick for conference championship weekend. Hopefully, you enjoyed this video. This is one of the last ones of these we'll be doing. I'll probably go through and pick every single bowl game as well, and we'll do that one together. But the season is starting to come to a close, and it's crazy. I will be at the Arizona State-Iowa State game, Big 12 title game. Very excited for that. I'll definitely try to get some footage out there for you guys. But as usual, if you enjoy the video, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, do all that fantastic stuff. And I will talk to you guys later.